It's not an exaggeration to call Obsession the directorial debut of Curry Barker, the absolute scariest horror movie of early 2026, made on a shoestring budget of just $750,000. This indie nightmare is quickly becoming a global phenomenon. It bypasses cheap jump scares entirely, instead digging deep into the psychological horror of manipulation, control, and emotional imprisonment. A slow-burning needle under the fingernails that leaves audiences suffocating long after the credits roll. Today, Last Movie dives straight into this harrowing narrative to unlock how selfishness, insecurity, and a twisted view of love can destroy everyone in its wake. At its core, the story follows Bear Bailey and his stunning girlfriend, Nikki Freeman. On the surface, they look like any honeymoon phase couple, cooking together, watching movies, laughing in bed, and enjoying what seems like picture-perfect bliss, but that romantic facade is just the prelude to severe emotional and physical trauma. Tragic as it is, the upcoming nightmare stems entirely from one man's hesitation, weakness, and desperate need for control.
I wish Nikki Freeman only loved me as a friend.
From the very opening scene, Bear shows subtle warning signs of decay, unkempt hair, a hollow stare, and an eerie lack of energy. Under the push of Ian, close friend from high school, he rehearses a confession of love in front of a roadside diner waitress. It seems innocent enough. Putting up courage before confessing to a long-time crush isn't unusual, especially when that crush sits right at the center of their tight-knit high school friend group, made up of 4 people: Bear, Ian, Nikki, and Sarah. Having known everyone for years, Ian clearly recognizes that Nikki despises cheesy, over-the-top melodrama. But our hopeless romantic? He has no clue who she actually is. He views her through a heavily sanitized, idealized lens.
So I keep telling myself, don't tell her she's too good. You'll lose her.
Take a look at one telling moment. As the group exits a local bar after their weekly Wednesday trivia night, he watches in awe as she hands $20 to a homeless man. In his mind, she is flawless, sweet, funny, charming, and endlessly compassionate. Like any obsessed admirer, he fixes on her bright spots while remaining completely blind to her real personality.
Does anybody have cash?
You're 18. She's too good.
Ian reveals that back in high school, bullies labeled her Tricky Nikki, a nickname she still deeply loathes today. He knows this, yet under Ian's toxic nudging and his own sheer awkwardness, he uses that exact insult to tease her, leaving her visibly upset.
Night, Freaky Nikki.
Ew, don't call me that. You know I don't like that.
Sorry.
Why push her buttons with something she hates? Is it sheer social clumsiness, bad advice, or proof that he never truly understood her to begin with? Consider how he shops for her birthday gift after learning she lost her quartz pendant down a street drain. He asks a store clerk for a gemstone packed with positive energy to lift someone's spirits. The seller recommends yellow quartz, a stone representing the ultimate symbol of light, prosperity, and pure willpower. It forces you to reframe your mindset, grab life by the reins, and rebuild lost confidence. It fuels your drive, sharpens your decisiveness, and wipes out every trace of self-doubt, which is exactly what Nikki needed all along. Yet the moment the clerk steps away, he quietly puts the yellow quartz back, claiming it doesn't suit her. It's a bizarre, telling choice. Just moments earlier over the phone, she opens up about quitting her job, not out of stress, but because she feels unfulfilled. She dreams of becoming a writer, willing to take risks and suffer for her passion. While she craves growth and adventure, he prefers complete stagnation. While Sarah submits art school applications and Nikki prepares for a leap into the unknown, he stays comfortably stuck behind the counter of a local music store, content with never reaching higher. When she shares her desire to write romance novels, he brushes it off with shallow questions.
So it's a romance.
No, it's not a romance, it's a love story.
Isn't that the same thing?
The dynamic completely exposes their clashing worldviews. Real love takes grit, late-night planning, and mutual sacrifice through life's brutal moments. Romance is the spark, but commitment is the engine. He doesn't see that. To him, love is just a fantasy drug, a perpetual high where he gets to play the hero without putting in any actual work. They aren't soulmates. They are 2 parallel lines destined never to touch.
What's so bad about being with me?
I've never been with you, Bear.
The exact moment Bear ignores the yellow quartz necklace, and grabs the wishing willow tree becomes the fatal turning point for this entire nightmare.
It doesn't just condemn him to a prison of his own twisted fantasies, proves he doesn't understand Nikki at all.
He's more than willing to
Steamroll over what she needs just to force what he wants.
Because the truth is, Nikki isn't in love with Bear. Through the opening act, she shows him warmth and respect, but zero
romantic interest. She even confides in Sarah that she views him more like a helpless little brother.
And honestly, it's not hard to see why. Bear is spineless, indecisive, and completely paralyzed by fear. He can't even confess his feelings directly, and has to practice his lines on a random waitress. While Ian watches, he overthinks every second, planning to confess in a deafening crowded bar, which is about as tone-deaf as it gets. Even when he finally gets Nikki alone,
he chickens out and steers the conversation as far away from his feelings as possible.
I was gonna ask you, I lost my train of thought.
When Nikki confronts him directly, asking if he harbors a crush on her, Bear panics and denies everything. Her face falls, and while most viewers assume she's crushed by his denial, the reality is much darker.
Nikki wants him to confess so she can let him down gently, shatter his illusions, and clear the suffocating tension between them.
Close look at the photo booth strips hanging in Bear's bedroom reveals the ugly truth long before the story spells it out. In the first shot,
he excitedly pulls Nikki close while she visibly pulls away.
In the second, Bear beams at the camera while Nikki scowls, throwing up a middle finger. But everything shifts in the third frame when Ian steps in. Nikki instantly wraps her arm around him, radiating genuine happiness. By the fourth frame,
Sarah leans in toward Bear.
Yet Nikki's eyes remain locked on Ian. Our hopeless lead keeps trying to physically wedge himself between them. 4 snapshots expose a hidden web. It turns out, Nikki and Ian have been secretly messing around behind Bear's back for a while, and he is completely oblivious.
Sarah.
A sensitive soul is head over heels for Bear. The catch? Bear has zero idea, even though Nikki mentions Sarah isn't exactly subtle about her feelings.
Sarah's asking about you all day today.
You're asking if I have feelings for Sarah?
This context clears up so many weird moments between Bear and his friends. It explains why Ian can casually call Nikki by that quirky nickname without her batting an eye, and why Ian keeps pushing Bear to tease her more than anything. It shows why the entire group is completely blown away when Nikki suddenly flips a switch and becomes insanely, unnaturally obsessed with Bear overnight.
You fucked Nikki, you dog. No.
Naturally,
people ask, why hook up with Ian behind closed doors instead of giving Bear a chance? Didn't she once admit he is the only person she can truly open up to? The one guy who isn't a brick wall.
You know, you're the only person that I get to really talk to about this stuff.
Look back at her confession, viewing him purely as a younger brother, and everything clicks.
To Nikki, our lead is a sensitive soul.
A guy who weeps over a dead cat and gets teary-eyed over movies.
Gentle, but fragile to a fault.
He hides in his comfort zone, floating through a dead-end job and sleeping in his late grandmother's house. He built a wall around himself long ago, terrified of growth or anything unfamiliar, completely content with staying small. On the other hand, Nikki is vibrant, outgoing and full of life. She finds Bear endearing, maybe even holding a deeper affection for him than typical friends, but strictly as family.
A helpless little brother she needs to shelter. That cozy sense of safety tricks her into believing she understands him,
making her comfortable enough to share her secrets. But Bear misinterprets everything,
convinces himself he is her rightful protector,
bound to care for her through small gestures like buying her drinks or giving her gifts. Sensing his suffocating motives, Nikki confronts him directly about his feelings. Prove she isn't using him, she insists on paying her own bill and visibly recoils whenever he mentions buying her a gift.
I got you something.
Ew, no, why does that make me nervous?
I don't know. That's an odd reaction.
Which brings us to the real catalyst. So where does Nikki's sudden, overwhelming devotion for Bear throughout the rest of the film actually come from? After dropping Nikki off and wallowing in his cowardice, Bear sits alone, staring at the souvenir tree, a cheap local item said to grant a single wish. Without hesitation, he makes his choice, wishing for Nikki to fall insanely completely in love with him. Instantly, reality warps. triggering a disturbing, unnatural obsession in her.
Why are you giving it to me?
Bear, I love you so much.
Everyone in their group harbors a personal dream. Sarah wants art school, Ian wants wealth, and Nikki just wants to write her own story. But Bear is so consumed by his fixations that he's willing to rob Nikki of her own mind just to make her his. There are so many red flags buried inside Bear's wish. Why doesn't he wish for them to fall in love naturally, or for both of them to be happy together?
Instead, he explicitly wishes for Nikki to love him more than anyone else in the world.
I wish Nikki Freeman loved me more than anyone in the fucking world.
That single detail exposes who he really is. Selfish, controlling, obsessed with being worshipped, and determined to force reality to bend to his will. The love he claims to feel isn't love at all.
It's a delusional fantasy he built in his own head and forced onto someone else.
It isn't mutual,
It doesn't come from a place of compassion.
and it sure as
Hell isn't a connection between two hearts.
it's pure manipulation, suffocating Nikki like a cage. Deep down, complete control is what he's wanted all along. Rewind the moment his cat dies after ingesting oxycodone. Potent, highly addictive painkiller that can easily be lethal in high doses.
The pills belonged to his late grandmother Barbara Bailey.
But even after moving in,
Bear never bothered to throw them out.
leaving them sitting right there in the cabinet. Watching the poor animal die breaks him, and he weeps like a child.
Most viewers assume he's just mourning a longtime pet.
But let's step back and ask
The real question,
if a guy can't even take care of himself or keep a small pet safe from his own reckless laziness, is he really equipped to care for another human being? Can he actually build a healthy relationship and weather life's storms alongside Nikki?
absolutely not.
And deep down, Nikki saw right through it.
It's gonna be weird not seeing you every day.
Not happy there.
The only thing Nikki doesn't realize is that Bear used the wishing Willow, leaving her entirely trapped under its dark spell. To most people, the item looks like a gimmick, but its magic is terrifyingly real, and the mechanics behind it are a nightmare. Once a wish is spoken aloud,
It becomes irreversible.
the only way to break it is if someone
Willingly wishes for Bear's wish to fail.
or if Bear dies.
That's right.
Death is his only escape from his own twisted desire. The wishing Willow is both a gift and a curse, proving that no one can save Bear from himself.
It's a bleak metaphor. You can't rely on anyone else to fix your life.
Real change has to come from within. Before Bear comes to that realization, things spiral into absolute horror. To keep things clear, let's call the girl from the first 20 minutes real Nikki. The version dominating the rest of the movie? That's fake Nikki.
Right after snapping the willow branch.
Bear is startled to find Nikki staring intensely at him, practically forcing her way into his house. The sudden shift unnerves him,
Especially when she stumbles over her words.
claiming her cat just died before launching into a dramatic story about her father dying of cancer. On a first watch, it feels like she's just weaponizing his hero complex.
To draw him in.
Why fabricate a lie about her father that his friends could easily debunk with a single phone call? To make sense of this, think back to the opening scene where Bear practices his confession on the roadside waitress.
And then after Nana passed, you were the one that called. Even when I didn't have anything to say and we just sat there.
To Bear, Nikki's defining traits are her empathy and warmth.
Her encouragement was the very thing that pulled him out of his darkest moments.
So, the second fake Nikki
Senses his suspicion. She shifts her tactics.
digging up deep personal trauma to manipulate his sympathy. It works like a charm, leaving Bear with no choice but to bring her inside. So why the bizarre slip-up about the dead cat?
Because fake Nikki isn't a real person. She is a physical projection of Bear's own warped perception. She exists entirely through the lens of his subconscious mind. That's why her memory glitches. In her twisted way, she is projecting real Nikki's kindness through the memory of Bear's dead cat.
Once they become a couple, fake Nikki's behavior morphs from strange to downright terrifying. She begins standing over Bear, filming him while he sleeps, moving around the house with eerily quiet feline steps. Why does she act this way? Why is her love so extreme that she flies into unhinged screaming fits the moment something goes wrong?
And more importantly,
why does she constantly feel like Bear doesn't love her back? Simple, because she is a mirror of Bear's own subconscious.
She starts absorbing his toxic traits. She demands total control over every interaction,
insisting that every touch, every gesture, and every moment of intimacy align perfectly with her twisted expectations. At first, the sheer romance blinds Bear to the warning signs, even subtle ones,
like the way she stares at him without blinking. But the illusion shatters when he asks her whether her father actually has cancer.
Instantly, fake Nikki explodes into an uncontrollable rage, screaming at the top of her lungs in a crowded restaurant.
No, 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 don't do that!
Bear and the surrounding diners sit paralyzed in shock. No one understands her sudden outburst. Only fake Nikki, operating on Bear's subconscious, realizes that he has begun to doubt her.
Desperate to hold on to him,
she mimics the next thing he holds dear, his dead cat Sandy. That night, instead of sleeping beside him, fake Nikki stands motionless in the pitch-black corner of the bedroom, wearing Bear's clothes and watching him sleep. When she finally steps out of the shadows, she stalks across the floor like a cat, sending a shockwave of terror through him. Within seconds,
she dissolves into hysterics,
sobbing and screaming about why he doesn't love her the way she loves him, growling in fury the moment he moves to get out of bed.
Stay!
It's a terrifying look at the suffocating nightmare of inescapable control.
From there, the horror escalates. Fake Nikki uses duct tape to seal the doors shut so Bear can't go to work, even going so far as to cook his dead cat's meat for his lunch. She is a warped reflection of Bear's own mind, the absolute worst version of what he could become, even without the wishing Willow involved. This dynamic reveals a chilling truth. If the roles were reversed,
Bear would have been the exact same monster,
controlling and manipulating real Nikki until there was nothing left of her.
Yet fake Nikki isn't built solely out of Bear's delusions.
To blend in without raising alarms, she still relies on real Nikki's
lingering memories.
That explains the bizarre, twisted love story she writes, based on Hansel and Gretel. In the classic fairy tale, two abandoned siblings wander through the woods, escape a cannibalistic witch by pushing her into her own oven, and return home with her treasure.
A classic story symbolizing resilience and sibling devotion, but filtered through fake Nikki's warped mind. The story transforms into something deeply unsettling,
perverse, and disturbing. Why write this?
Real Nikki saw Bear strictly as a brother,
and her greatest ambition was to write a genuine romance novel. Merging those real memories with Bear's toxic subconscious creates a horrifying short story that leaves everyone stunned. Later, when a party game forces Bear to draw a stick, ordering him to kiss the girl on his left, who happens to be Sarah, fake Nikki snaps, aggressively shoving Sarah away to mark her territory. So where is real Nikki during all this?
When Bear snapped that branch, real Nikki's consciousness was shoved into a dark,
silent vault inside her own mind while the fake persona took over. That's why,
in rare seconds when fake Nikki's grip slips,
real Nikki suddenly surfaces, utterly disoriented and oblivious to what's happening.
What the fuck?
It's also why fake Nikki refuses to sleep.
She knows if she drifts off, real Nikki will reach out to Bear and expose the truth. Distress signals leak out constantly, though fake Nikki's covers them up as substance-induced panic attacks. Look closely at the photo she snaps while Bear sleeps. The text, "Help me," is subtly embedded in the background. Or when Bear drags her to Ian's party,
real Nikki briefly takes over,
spiraling into a breakdown, screaming, "That's not me," as she desperately tries to harm herself. And what is Bear doing while his dream girl suffocates? He just sits there motionless, wincing in embarrassment before his friends, completely ignoring their pleas to get her to a hospital. His cowardice and possessiveness peak in a chilling scene where real Nikki surfaces while fake Nikki slumbers.
She begs him to kill her to end this endless living hell.
Bear, kill me, please.
Instead of trying to break the curse, Bear just stares at her and mutters, "Is being with me really that awful?" before slipping out to meet Sarah in a dark park. That moment doesn't just make you hate Bear, it makes him downright horrifying. He never takes responsibility for the nightmare he created, nor does he offer a hand to
save anyone.
He just runs away, seeking validation from a girl who actually likes him. It leaves you wondering, If Bear ended up with Sarah, would he ever be satisfied, or is he just chasing ego fixes? It explains why.
Back when he was rehearsing his confession for Nikki,
Bear hollowly replies, "I'd choose you no matter what, instead of I love you."
That I would choose you over everything.
When Nikki catches them together in Sarah's car at 3 a.m., she charges out of nowhere and brutally kills Sarah without a second thought, sending Bear into a full-blown panic, realizing he's in way over his head.
he rushes back to the souvenir shop.
Buys another wishing willow and begs Ian to break the spell. Naturally, Ian thinks Bear has lost his mind and sarcastically wishes for $1 billion instead. As money rains down from the sky, the last flicker of hope dies in Bear's eyes. He heads home with his backup tree, planning to force Nikki to undo the wish. Since fake Nikki constantly mirrors what Bear desires,
She strips the clothes off Sarah's corpse.
wears them and copies Sarah's hair and tattoos. Through sheer physical terror,
She forces Bear to say he loves her.
executing Ian on the spot when he interrupts them. Trapped, Bear points a gun at himself, chickening out at the last second to gulp down a bottle of oxycodone instead, only to immediately panic and try to throw the pills back up. Then comes the snap. Fake Nikki breaks the second willow,
Wishing for Bear to love her the way she loves him.
but it's too late.
As Bear collapses,
Foaming at the mouth, the original curse breaks, leaving real Nikki stranded in the wreckage. A brilliant, vibrant woman who had everything ahead of her is left completely destroyed by one man's narcissistic crusade for control.
she's left with nothing, facing prison.
A lifetime on the run or ending her own life with the gun on the floor. Yet you can't entirely blame fake Nikki.
She is simply the monstrous mirror of Bear's own desires.
Pay attention to what the souvenir shop vendor tells Bear over the phone.
Is her love real?
Just because you chose this for her doesn't make it less real.
Fake Nikki's love for him is real. Realer than anything Bear ever faked.
But it's a terrifying algorithmic love coded by his own selfish demands.
When Bear leaves for work, she stands completely frozen in place with a dead smile, so paralyzed by his absence that she soils herself on the floor.
Without it,
Her entire operating system shuts down.
it's an uncanny reflection of artificial intelligence,
Emotionless,
soulless,
operating entirely on data harvested from Bear's mind.
even during intimacy.
Her face remains a blank void. Tearfully,
She begs him,
promising she can act normal, be real Nikki, or become anyone he wants. Bear just cold shoulders her. "You're not Nikki. None of this is real." In a twisted way, you feel a surge of pity for fake Nikki. She is a prisoner to her own code, hardwired to worship a pathetic man, evolving to meet standards built on pure toxicity. Her love was real. Her creator was just trash. Bear caused every ounce of suffering, leaving Sarah and Ian dead in his wake. The true horror of this film doesn't come from fake Nikki's violent outbursts, but from Bear's
pathological obsession with control.
Viewers might think that if Bear had been bolder and confessed sooner, this tragedy could have been avoided. But let's be real. If real Nikki had rejected him normally, he would have snapped that branch anyway. Remember the tiger's eye stone fake Nikki gave him?
In ancient folklore,
The tiger's eye represents strength, resolve, and confidence, traits Bear never possessed. The only time he ever looked confident was when the second fake Nikki was created.
smirking as she looked at him.
There were no what-ifs. Confidence can't be faked with a
Magic shortcut.
and whatever isn't genuine will eventually rot from the inside out.